get started with this first module of the second unit for the course. And we're moving right along the readings for this semester, and we're entering into a new reading that I'm hoping that is going to be interesting and engaging to you. It is a reading that it's organized around the idea of the electronic tribe. I have to frame this reading, and that's the intention of this short, brief lecture, in the context of anthropological studies. As you know, the concept of tribe is a concept that has been explored and defined in traditional ethnographic work for the longest time. And it is a concept that I think it has obscured as much as it has provided new understandings on how humans live and get organized socially. But I want to bring you to the image that I have presented to you to get started with this presentation. Is the image of a tribe. And I don't know if you're going to agree with me, but there are critical factors in this image. That is what we have impressed on us for the longest time. Is a tribe is something primal. It's something somewhat savage, somewhat primitive, that explains how we were once organized and how we once lived together in small groups in isolated places tied to natural environments and low-level civilization. The image that I have selected for you is actually a photograph in color, probably taken when there was no color in imagery. This has nicely been colorized for us, but what we see is a relatively small group of people, maybe 30, maybe 40, maybe less, all of which have interesting traits. First of all, they are non-Western looking, which seems to be one fixated idea of what a tribe is. It's non-Western. That's something that belongs to that past thinking of Taylor's point of view and explanation of the progress of civilization in the planet. For those of you that have taken a course in anthropological theory, you would be familiar with Taylor and how he saw society moving from less sophisticated, less complex to more complex. And so somewhere in our Taylorian past, we were part of these larger than families groups of people that have traits that they all look alike. Tribes would tend to be darker than whiter in skin in our imagination. They will be not so sophisticated, naked-like creatures, and but they will have things in common. There will be a deep, complex organization in the group once you get into studying it, in which you have different statuses going on. You have gender differences, and you have specialization in the group. Someone is doing the child rearing, someone is doing the hunting, and someone is doing the connection with the deep forces of nature. And that's when the figure of the shaman comes in handy. So we have always had, and that's again our understanding of our primal self, those who can connect better with the deepest forces, and then you have the practical folks, and you have the somewhat domestic and familiar connections between people. That would be a tribe. You have a reason to stick together. Usually have to do with surviving and remaining a whole, and you have common enemies, and you have to stick together so you can fend the group and bring the group to survival and sustainability. So that's the original idea of what a tribe is. It's simple, it's potent, it's territorial in the sense that it's somewhat localized and well adapted to certain environments, and quite effective at being adapted to those environments. As a tribe, we stick together, we look out for each other, and we have our own language, our own codes, our own understandings. We can easily identify who's in and who's out, who's friend and who's foe. And belonging to the group is an asset because that gives us a chance to survive and to be whole, to be healthy, to be safe, and to be sheltered. Um, and somewhat we recognize those tribal traits when we relate to those that are closer to us, and we have been somehow in our education given this idea that somewhat we have a tribal self, inner self that is worth exploring. So, fast forward a number of years, and sorry with the glitch, and now we have a whole new environment in front of us, which is the electronic environment that we are calling the digital realm. And of course, somehow it's been a natural progression to think of bringing and updating this idea of the tribe and see how that plays out in this new medium of virtual and electronic communication. Whether that is a real thing or not, the fact is that we're talking about electronic tribes constantly, and we kind of see electronic tribes emerging here and there. So I think the challenge ahead of us as people that are studying this in detail is to, first of all, question the very concept of tribe, to wonder and to explore whether or not it is applicable, whether or not we're really onto a new categorization that is worth a new conceptual baggage that is worth transposing to the new environment in which we live, or whether we are just obscuring the understanding of these new communities that are emerging. And as I said before, I want to bring caution. So before we embrace this idea of the existence of electronic tribes, let's explore and see if it is applicable, and most fundamentally, whether or not the very same concept of tribe is a concept that will help us illuminate and better understand the new communities that are emerging out there in the digital realm. So the one thing that it's a historical fact and a reality is that there are new emerging worlds, or if you like it, arenas of communication with humans because of the digital tools that have emerged, um, most specifically since the 1980s and 90s, when the emergence of certain institutions and places like certainly the internet has created new conditions for communication. And as soon as the new conditions for communication emerge, the very first phenomenon that occurred, or maybe the driving phenomenon that generated the creation of the inter-network, was precisely the need for communicating. I don't know if you're familiar with, but because of the readings that we're doing, you are now aware that the initial networks were uh, stem from the need of different scientists and computer technicians to connect to each other and share information across computer platforms. And the rest is history in the sense that the network just expanded and was gradually but steadily transformed into something that not just computer wizards and highly trained technicians could use, but now just about anyone can and is using and participating in this world of new communication based on digital technologies. So because of this explosion, because that's what it is. It's just when I can only imagine centuries from now when they talked about our days, the very days that we're living in, when they talk about our age, they will talk about the massive explosion of new communities and and means of intercommunication between among people in the planet. And think of it is interesting that as the population expands exponentially from 1 or 2 billion people to 7.5 that we're now, and continues to expand whether we like it or not because of the inertia. As the population expands, also the means of communicating expands, and I don't think that is casual. I think it's an integral part of what explains this massive explosion of the human presence in the planet. That, as I mentioned in the introduction of this module and unit, it's so complex and so deep and so vast and so relevant that has given place to what anthropologists, social scientists, scientists, and even geologists have deemed to be a whole new era. The Anthropocene, that is the era of humans, and the archosphere, which is the archosphere, which is the new layer that we humans have deposited on top of prior geological layers. I think it's the changes that we're seeing as are so massive in proportion that it's just quite overwhelming when you think of it. Even and please don't take this as a political statement, but even climate change, um, it's been definitely and with overwhelming evidence caused by the way we and the rate at which we're burning fossil fuel and doing other changes to the planet. So a whole new, a whole new time, a whole new moment, and of course that means the emergence of new communities of communication that we can loosely call tribes. But let's explore that. With the emergence of these new communities that are there, that are real, that are empirically there for us to explore, of course, we are confronted with a new research horizon. And this is the very reason why we're talking about um, digital ethnographies, because there's just as there's an expansion in the level of networks of communication, of course, there's an expanded interest in different social sciences and certainly in anthropology to explore this new research horizon. But here's what's amazing about this, and part of the reason why I put together this course is that now, like never before, we have access to massive amounts of information on human interaction. Massive amounts of information on human interaction. Just think of how much was typed just today on any of the social media that you're used to explore and see. It's in the billions of characters, trillions of characters, billions of interactions. It's just staggering. And it's happening every day. So what happens here is not, it doesn't mean that everything that we typed or a politician types on Twitter will be relevant or deep or fundamental to understand, but it is the the sum of those interactions what really sets trends and new habits and new ideas that are important to explore. The task can be overwhelming for anyone, so we need to compartmentalize and understand and identify units of analysis and periods of time that we can narrowly circumscribe so that we can start and continue exploring these um, new arenas of human interaction. So it's doable, even if it is so amazing and overwhelming in terms of the numbers and the it's what they call massive large data. we can and we shall endeavor to explore and understand what's remaining and what's changing as this happens. So a number of questions emerge, many questions, but two that I would like to emphasize, just like the book is emphasizing, is to what extent these new interactions are real. And I will bring to your attention that what I'm doing right now, speaking in front of a computer, in the hopes that you will get to see and to listen this narration later on, will mean that you and I are in some form of communication. But is this real? I'm not standing in front of a group right now looking at your um, faces and reading your your um, your reactions to what I'm saying. I can't do that. So does this mean that when you hear my voice and you think of what I'm saying, does that mean that that's not going to happen? I think that's bound to happen. As you're listening to these questions, your brain is firing up and maybe dismissing or maybe taking to heart what I'm asking you to consider. And but I'm not there and you're not here. So is this interaction real? Is this interaction something worth exploring and studying? I won't give you an answer. I just want you to think about it, and then we can later on exchange more communication and come up with new understanding. You and I, maybe not in a synchronous way, but maybe we can. Are these relationships, is this online course just as valuable in a real world interaction as any other type of relationship that you have? Are online interactions, dating and communicating your political beliefs, are those just as real as if you were sipping a cup of coffee and fighting with someone about their political inclination? Those are the questions that we're asked to consider as we navigate this course. All right, so as I was explaining when I was asking you to take a look at the picture of the tribe that I have selected for you. The tribe, the idea of the tribe is, it implies certain level of complexity, but certainly it implies the presence or existence of some member of that community that has a special position and connection to deeper forces. So what are the shamans in this new brave world of the virtual? And what happens, and the one thing that I can tell you that is well represented and explored in the book that we're reading is that what was unlikely to happen in the physical world of human interaction, the individuals that we would dismiss as unlikely to have positions of power and leadership, uh, somewhat these people tend to be empowered by this new field. And this goes to say that perhaps we are indeed in front of a new moment in which other characteristics are taking precedence, and that'll be certainly a new moment and a new event in the history, the long-standing history of human relationships. So again, it seems like many otherwise unqualified candidates are now in the best position to become chiefs or shamans of their own electronic tribes. Interesting, huh? Food for thought. All right, so if we are bound to explore this new space, what are the things that we need? What are the steps that we need to follow? And I have to tell you that these sets of steps that I'm reading in a second are precisely the ones that have helped me organize the materials for this course. So the first thing we had to do is work our way into the realm of conceptualization. I don't know if you were already a little frustrated that I didn't ask you to jump into exploring a social group or is Second Life or a dating site immediately, but I ask you to spend a full 4 to 5 weeks simply gaining some insight as to what would be the right concepts and the interesting set of concepts to use in order to conceptualize this new world. So the first step will be that one. How do we conceptualize electronic tribes? Um, so while in this second unit and the fourth modules that we're going to be exploring now will be running in parallel with your individual discovery and exploration of one specific community or electronic tribe, I'm still going to be asking you to continue thinking about the very same concept of tribe and community in the digital realm. So once we have identified the main characteristics of a group or a tribe, then I think it is important for us to start exploring the consequences of this new form of integration of human communication, or if you like it, of electronic tribalism. So, are we really deeply, fundamentally changing the norms of human interaction? Or are we just expanding or transponing our ways in the physical, real time world into this new space? So, what are we doing with this? What are the social consequences of electronic tribalism? As ethnographers, we have to go beyond that exploration in terms of creating documentations that will serve as testimony and evidence for our new understandings of the online culture. So we will have to be documenting this. So how do we document this as ethnographers? And that's something that I will explore in a greater length, and you will be actually doing some of that during the semester. How to document the development? How do we create an image of what's going on out there? So again, this is food for thought for you. Think of your own in individual research interest for this semester. If you're interested in dating, online dating, so how do you document that? What kinds of integrated views of it you will be able to bring to us? Because if I was to send you to a community, you will bring images and recordings and and written observations and narratives. So what would be your image here? What would be your recording in the digital arena? And I'm sure you're going to find really creative ways of doing this. But we also need to explore the darker side of electronic cultures. And we will have to explore the whole spectrum of human behavior, from those behaviors that, in the sense of that Durkheim was looking for, that help us bring cohesiveness or integration to the group, but we also have to explore those tendencies that will be disruptive and that will be counter to the prevailing culture, because that's part of what we're going to be finding on the internet. This fourth point might be a selection of a potential topic for the development for your papers for the end of the semester. So more food for thought. Here's the thing. I call this a reality check. I am quite uncomfortable with the use of the concept tribe to explore virtual communities, and I have to just be open about it because I'm giving you a reading that seems to be pretty comfortable with the concept of tribe. As I said at the beginning, most of us have a sense that we belong to a tribe, and certainly to an electronic tribe. Some of you are doing online gaming, which is certainly quite a crowd tribe. Some of you are in distribution lists. Some of you are simply using your email inside the university. All of that makes you qualify as a member of an electronic tribe according to what the book has to say about a tribe. And in most cases, these tribes and these communication spaces are nothing but a supplement to what we do normally in our face-to-face interaction and communication. But the reality is that also these electronic places where we live are creating behaviors and physical behaviors that are different and unique. Um, we go out there to fish for little creatures because we have downloaded an application in our phones, and I can still see some of that going on in the streets of California. And I saw that in Spain, and I saw that in Mexico, and it's a thing that just happened this last summer to go after these little animals, and people going out there and modifying their behavior and walking uh, using a telephone. That's that's to me just absolutely fascinating, and so it's real. So it's certainly there are new things that are happening out there that are worth exploring and considering. So yeah, we need to conceptualize and reconceptualize. So what is traditionally a tribe? So a tribe in its very basic terms is nothing but an aggregation of people that have bonds of consanguinity, land, cultural singularities. So we belong to we're close relatives. We have and live off of the same land, and we dress and think and sing alike. Those are the cultural singularities. And food has also same and similar meanings for you and for me in terms of what's comfort food, right? That's a traditional tribe. You have your tribes, your real tribes, right? Um, but it is also true, as I said, that we consider the tribe to be like a dormant beast and savage inside of us, right? That the non-Western self and primal self that it's somewhat in our reptilian brain. And we know that we have that inherent primitive in us, and we know that eventually that irrational self is bound to surface again and make us do things that are weird and interesting. And somehow there's this vivid image that the groups that are emerging out there in the internet have liberties and freedoms that are releasing those forces of nature that are inherent in our primitive selves. Don't we all know that we have a reptilian brain, right? So, so far as anthropology goes, a tribe was a, a very specific concept that was created in order to understand transition from more simpler forms of social organization into more complex forms of social organization. Not necessarily thinking that every single group and culture in the planet will go through the same phases, but certainly that humans as a whole did have elements that generated and permitted more complex forms of social political organization. So tribe will be at the very base of that initial transition into in more complex organizational stages. So a tribe is a social political organization. So there are social and political reasons why the tribe sticks together. And it is comprised of what's the nuclear base of society, that is the family, although for some is the gens that goes beyond families, but let's say families or clans, and then other groups that are sharing certainly a common ancestry and spatio-temporal particularities, cultural artifacts. Spatio-temporal meaning the same space and time in their past, and then they have similar cultural artifacts. Think of Mesoamerican traditions or Neolithic traditions in Europe or other types of traditions in other areas of the world. And then all of these elements and all of these individuals are united by this consensual, that is, this agreed upon imagination of an affinity that has social and biological basis. That is a tribe in the traditional anthropological sense. If you take this definition into its bare bones as a basic understanding, so tribes can be understood as an active confederacy of humans interested in sharing something. That'll be the most basic definition of it. An active confederation of humans interested in sharing something. Collections of people that are sharing similarities both in beliefs and behaviors. So in that sense, in that very basic sense, tribes are nothing but modalities of thought, ways in which people think alike. And tribes will be, as from an institutional standpoint, a vehicle of this social, interactional, and ideational intercourse among human beings. So social interactional, which means um, the exchange of ideas and goods and elements in a social context, but that is framed in common ideas. That's the ideational intercourse among human beings. So if we move away from the more specific um, evolutionist view of tribes and just look at the bare bones, just a collection of peoples with similarities. That would be the bare bones of what a tribe is. And in that sense, I think we can approach what the ethnographers are saying. And they're saying, well, if we go to the basics of what a tribe is, what is it that we need to have a tribe? 4 elements. First, we need to have people. Second, people have to have a common purpose. They have to have protocols of interaction, and they have to have a technology to share. And that applies to ancient tribes as much as it applies to electronic tribes. And in that sense, many ethnographers will be in agreement that we can appropriately talk about electronic tribes. So if you apply these 4 elements to the world of digital tribes, electronic tribes will be exclusive in that you identify who's in and who's out. It's narrowly focused. We are a group that is geared towards understanding politics. It's an aggregate of human beings in cyberspace that instead of using the physical space to transmit and exchange ideas, we use cyberspace, the digital realm, and we're bound together because we have a common purpose. And we employ a common protocol. We communicate in this way, saying this goes first and that goes last, and this is how you do it. And then we are exchanging things that are critical to our existence. So in that sense, I think they are making a compelling case for the use of tribes as an appropriate use and understanding. All right, so this is my introduction to the reading of the book. It's a fascinating book to read, and so I want you to get started with that introduction, the first 3 chapters of the book as we explore. I want you to notice, by the way, that the book is divided into 4 sections. So we're going to start this week with the reading and exploration of the first section. All right, have a wonderful week, and I'll keep on seeing you around. Let me see if I can stop this. All right, goodbye.